Welcome back to track 2 at DAMFest Europe. Please welcome Greg Guest and Ruth Anthony.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's great to be here today at DAMFest Europe. Thanks to the folks at Henry Stewart for having us today. And thanks to all of you for tuning into this session. I'm really excited to share with you today some very cool AI-driven techniques for monitoring your brand and your content and your brand assets, as well as talk about kind of best practices for remaining compliant with your brand and the things you'll need to do to maintain legal compliance, brand compliance, and maintain a positive reflection of your brand in the landscape. So thanks for joining us. I'm here with my associate Ruth, and excited to share our content with you today. So it's a crazy world we live in for a variety of reasons, as we all know. But regarding brands, it's specifically crazy because we have content everywhere. And there are tons of different distribution channels in play today, and your content needs to go out across a variety of channels, a variety of devices, a variety of different consumption methods by your customers. And it's important for your content to be top quality as it goes out to your customers and be consistent so that it's really speaking to your customers in the same way across all those devices or channels, no matter how they're making their journey through your content, that they're receiving a consistent messaging whenever and wherever they're consuming your brand and your content. As if that wasn't hard enough to manage, everything has to be done yesterday, right? And speed is of the utmost importance. So getting your content out to market super quickly is a real competitive advantage, and you have to be able to do that to remain competitive with your brand. So that's where some of the issues come into play, because as you're trying to be speedy about it, you can make mistakes or you can hit hurdles or roadblocks. Most of those roadblocks come into play during the content production and approval process. So as you're putting brand assets together, many marketers say that's where they hit roadblocks with getting content approved or making sure that it's compliant with restrictions that may apply to that particular brand asset or that content that they're generating. And there's really 4 pillars of kind of brand management and compliance that we talk about. There's the legal compliance, which is really being compliant with the contracts and agreements associated with your brand assets and the content you're generating. So that's things like talent agreements with models and photographers, et cetera. Other agreements or partnerships you have with other brands or partners, or content that you're licensing in. And so remaining legally compliant to the contractual obligations that you have. And being able to provide transparency to that information. So it's not kind of enough to just make sure that you have all those contracts in a filing cabinet. You have to be able to have transparency to your users in your organization so that they can understand what restrictions apply to the brand content as they're buying and sourcing assets, as they're producing new content, and as they're distributing your brand campaigns and content and marketing promotions out into the marketplace. So that's kind of the legal compliance and the transparency. Then you have the brand compliance pillar, which is really about keeping your brand compliant with the overall brand strategy. So things like your logo being consistent, your product packaging being the latest versions across all your different places where people are seeing your products, making sure your brand assets fit the tone and the style and the strategy of your marketing campaigns and promotions. And if you're working with ambassadors or spokespeople or influencers or things like that, that you're getting the right messaging from those people, and that those partnerships are reflecting your brand in a positive way out in the marketplace as well, so that everything is reflecting positively and consistently with your brand, and giving you that brand consistency across all the distribution channels where your content goes. And that's really going to allow you to if you monitor and track that, it's really going to allow you to understand how your brand's performing and make sure that you're amplifying your messaging in a consistent way to your customers at all times in all places. So what do you need to do to really kind of address those 4 different pillars? Well, starting with, kind of the legal compliance and the rights management piece of it, you want to be able to capture the rights information. So that's kind of the first step, is to be able to make sure you're capturing any rights and restrictions that are applied to your content as a result of agreements that you have with talent, with partners, with third parties, et cetera. Now, it sounds pretty easy, but when you actually look at what a typical rights configuration looks like for just one image, you can see how complex it can be. So you could have multiple models or actors involved. So you have talent agreements that are layered on top of each other with different restrictions around regions that you can use that content in, time frames, distribution platforms or channels that you're allowed to distribute that content to. Then you might additionally have stock images that you're licensing in that are part of that asset, which could layer on other restrictions. You might have location releases if you're shooting on location, and you have restrictions layered on top of that. You might have partnerships or other brands represented in your campaign, which could also layer on additional legal requirements there and restrictions that you need to be compliant with. Now, if you're doing video, that's an order of magnitude even greater, because now you have things like voiceover, director agreements, producer agreements, song rights, et cetera. So when you layer all these on top of each other, it's very hard to capture all this. And not only do you need to be able to capture it in a very detailed way, which typically requires some sort of rights management model to do, it's more than just kind of simple metadata that you might capture. It's more than just tagging an image with some metadata. It's really complex structures and windows of rights that come into play here. So you need a way to be able to capture that. And you also need a way to be able to capture all the folks you're working with. So all the parties you're working with, the talent you're working with, and be able to capture the agreement rights for each of those individuals or third parties that are layering those rights onto your assets. Now, capturing it's not just enough. You're going to need to provide transparency to that as well. But let's look at how you might capture that information. So I'm actually going to just log into my my rights management system here and show you the type of capabilities you kind of need to track that. So as I log in, I have, as I said, access to all the talent that I'm working with, all the different third parties that I'm doing agreements with here. And so, for example, let's say I'm an agency, I'm working with a spokesperson, I'm working with Emma Raducanu, who's an up and coming popular tennis player. And let's say I'm doing a promotion working for my client, let's say they're Nike, or a sports brand like that, for example. So I can track all the people I'm working with. I can track the spokesperson information here. I have contact information for Emma. So if I need to reach out to that person about the agreement or the contract, I can do that. And if I drill down into that information, I can capture, address information. I can capture things like social links, so all her social sites, so that I know where her social media content is going to. And I can also track all the agreement rights that I have with her. So if I go under my agreements tab here, I can see the agreements that I have in play with her. And I have a spokesperson agreement with Emma. And if I drill down into that agreement rights detail, I can see I can capture the rights from that agreement. So here I have some high level information about that agreement, like the start date and the end date. But really what I'm doing here is focused on capturing the rights of it, not necessarily all the legal clauses that go in that. I can attach in that contract document if I want to store that here as well, or point to that in some sort of content storage for the agreement. But here I'm capturing really the agreement rights. So if I look at the rights that are associated with Emma's agreement, I can see that the marketing rights I've obtained are for all territories, so worldwide rights, for social media, digital, and print channels, and that's for a period of time. So those are the rights I've got from her. And now once I've got that agreement rights captured, any brand assets that I have coming into my ecosystem that are associated with Emma can be associated to this agreement, and they will inherit the rights from that agreement. So here I've got some assets. I can see I've got Emma holding a trophy here. It's tied to this agreement. If I then drill down into that particular asset, I can now see that it's tied to Emma's agreement. I can also see that it's tied to 2 other agreements here. As I mentioned, you might have layered agreements. So I also have a United States Tennis Association agreement, which maybe has restrictions on the brand or the logo and how it can be used. And I have a photographer agreement here, which may layer on additional rights restrictions. And if I look at the rights in total for this asset, you can start to see that picture of the 3 different sets of rights being layered. So I have rights from Emma, I have a broad use, all territories, all uses from the Tennis Association, and I have digital print and social media for a time period from the photographer for that. So I've captured all that information in my rights management system, and that's going to really allow me to provide that transparency and that visibility at each stage of the process. So whether I'm doing content planning and media selection from within my DAM or sourcing from a third-party source, or whether I'm in content production in my creative tools, or whether I'm going about to distribute my content, you want to be able to provide visibility into that rights data so that at any step there, the user, without stopping, can get a real-time answer about what they can do with that content. So if I'm sourcing images during media planning, I can see what I can and can't use for the particular campaign target that I'm setting up. When I'm creating my creative content and my layouts, I can get a real-time answer as I drag images into my layout, whether or not they're going to be okay for my campaign, so that I don't waste my time using something in my layout that I can't use later. And then once I go out with finished content to distribution, I can have a final check there to make sure that the channels that I'm distributing that content to are compliant with what I'm doing with my assets and all the agreements that I've captured for those assets. So let me show you what that looks like. Now that I've captured all my information here in the rights management tool, I can do a clearance. So let's say I'm going through my assets and I'm putting together a campaign and I'm selecting some assets. Maybe I have a US Open logo. I have an image of Emma on the court here. I have an image of Emma in action, and I have an image of Emma holding the trophy here. And those are the images I'm going to use in my content that I'm putting together for my promotion. So now I can say, hey, I know what my campaign is. Can I clear those things here for the period of November? For example, let's say I'm going to run this for the month of November. And I want to run this campaign in Europe and North America. And I want to run it on digital channels and social media. And I can say, what can I do with that? And I can see that I'm getting mixed results with those assets. So I have one asset here, which is not available at all. I have no rights for that asset. I have one here for the US Open, which is completely available. So I have all the rights for that. And in the middle, I have 2 assets that are partially available. And if I drill down into those, I can start to understand why they're only partially available. So in this particular case, everything that I asked for is partially available. And if I drill down a bit further, I can see actually which agreements are prohibiting me from using that. And I can see that this particular agreement here has a time frame that's not allowed. So part of the time frame I asked for in November is restricted for this asset. And so I know that I can't use it for that time period. For the other asset here, I also have a partial availability. This one, if I drill down, I can see that I asked for Europe, and all of Europe's available except for France. So for some reason, I don't have French rights. That asset is prohibited from being used in France. So now I can address that in my process, and I can say, okay, this agreement didn't allow for this to be used in that particular way. So I can contact that photographer now, Steve Weston, and I can say, hey, Steve, we need to extend your agreement. And I can actually do an amendment here, and I can come in and actually amend those rights and extend that date out to the end of the year with Steve's permission, obviously, and compensation most likely. And then I can amend that agreement. And then I can come back to my clearance result. And now I'm going to see that it's green. So I've rerun that clearance, and now I've got a green light for that one. And this one's not available in France. So what I can do is I can just say, oh, well, you know what? Instead of being so broad with Europe, we'll just exclude France from our plans, and we'll do a different campaign in France. So now I can update my clearance here and get a green light for all 3. And I can actually remove this one from my clearance entirely, because I don't want to, this one I have no rights to. So we'll just remove that one. And now I've got green across the board for my campaign, and I'm good to go. So that's the capability you want to provide. And you can provide that from right within your DAM systems. So no matter what platform you're on, you want to be able to plug that in and have that visibility through your DAM system to your users so they can get green, red, yellow, right without stopping in their flow. And likewise, within the creative tools I mentioned, so within Adobe, if you're working in Adobe or you're working in Microsoft tools, you can have that same plugin to be able to see that rights clearance capability there. So it doesn't end there. Once your content goes out and gets distributed, then you want to be able to track and monitor it wherever it's going. So you want to be able to really look at your sites, your e-commerce sites where content's going, your social media, your brand websites, and you want to be able to track that content there so that you can find and identify it and look for things like violations that you have and expirations of your content. So again, just to show you that real quickly here in my rights management system, I can go into my sites that I'm tracking, and this is the content tracking capability, and I'm tracking a variety of sites as you see here. And so I'm tracking my Instagram site, and I can go into my Instagram site and see all the images that are found on my Instagram feed. And it's going to find a lot of noise that maybe are not rights managed images and some that are rights managed. So if I only want to see my rights managed, I can limit it to the ones that match the images in my rights management tool. And then specifically, I'm looking for Emma. So I want to drill down into Emma, and you can see it's found multiple assets for Emma, and they all have variations of the way they were marketed, but they're still matched here. And if I drill down into that particular asset and look at the usage of it, I can see all the sites it's used on, and I can see for Instagram, it's missing some rights. For my brand website, it's expired. For my partner website, it's nearing expiration. And for Facebook, it's valid. So I've got some things to deal with there. I've got some issues, some red and some yellow issues that I need to deal with. But that's the type of content monitoring you want to be able to do so that you can make sure you're keeping your content in compliance even after it goes out the door. So the final pillar I wanted to talk about was really about, once it's out there in the wild, in the ecosystem, is amplifying your brand by really keeping an eye on your brand across all media channels that are out there to understand how your brand is being reflected for consistency for things like spokespersons, logos, product packaging, things like that. And I'm going to bring my associate Ruth onto the call now to share with you some really cool AI-driven tools on how you can do that. So Ruth, thanks for joining me today. I'll let you take over here and share this stuff with the folks.
Oh, thanks, Greg. So I'll quickly show you ways that you can leverage existing content to amplify your campaign, and then demonstrate how AI tools can identify the content that's relevant to you and your brand. So in our example, Nike's collaboration with Emma Raducanu means that she's wearing the Nike label at her tournaments, exposing their brand as well as their products. And these tournaments are covered by the world's media, with scores of photographers on the sidelines at every match, photographing the action. So our IDS Picture Desk platform receives all of this content from the photographers and their agents for media outlets to discover and license, creating basically an online marketplace for sourcing content. So let's take a look here. I'm going to go straight into the sports channel and let's have a look at what content we have from the US Open. So if I do a quick search for US Open, we'll see we've got close to 25,000 images here from the US Open. And it's everything from, we've got the men's final here, we've got further down, we've got some doubles matches, and then our women's final featuring Emma Raducanu. But let's drill down and have a look for our images of Emma Raducanu, but being a bit more specific with our search. And then now we're seeing all the images that match Emma Raducanu. So we can find an image that we want to maybe use in a campaign, and we can contact the agency with the rights to license this image and fill out the form here and get in touch with them about licensing this particular image. So then obviously when we have that agreement from the agency to use the content, we need to be sure that we record all of those rights, as Greg has demonstrated, so that we can remain compliant with our agreement for the usage of this image. But now let's just go back to look at our results of Emma Raducanu, and we can see that there's actually still some content here that doesn't actually feature Emma. We have content, we have images that are the atmosphere from the match, and we have images of her opponent in the match, which rightfully have her name in the metadata because it's describing what's going on in the image. It's a final between these two players, so that's why she's mentioned. But maybe we, you know, as she's our spokesperson for our brand, maybe we just want to see images of Emma. We don't want to have to look through all these atmosphere pictures and pictures of the other player which isn't relevant to us. So we have additional techniques using AI technology that can help us to refine these searches based on specific elements. These can be a face, it can be a logo, or it could even be a particular product within an image. So I'm going to start with face match. So I can start with an image here of Emma, and if I click on this icon here on the left, which is our face search icon, we can now send that image to the system. So this was our query image, which we've sent to the system, and we're saying, show me more images that contain this face. So now we're only seeing images that have Emma Raducanu in them. We're not getting images of the other people where she's just mentioned in the caption. So we can scroll down here, we can see her at different events, and we can see her here playing tennis with the Duchess of Cambridge, for example. Now let's get a bit more specific and say we want to see some images of her wearing our particular products, like for example, maybe our tennis shoes. So we want to do a campaign on these shoes. So let's go back to our search results here for Emma Raducanu. And I'm going to do a visual search of the particular tennis shoe that we're interested in. So I'm just going to take this image of the tennis shoe and do a visual search for this shoe within our Emma Raducanu results. And now, as you can see, we're getting all the results back of Emma wearing the tennis shoes. And these are obviously images from the final where she's just won, and some more images down here where she's wearing the same shoes while playing with the Duchess of Cambridge. And then we can get even more detailed and train a model to recognize very specific features, like a brand's logo, for example, which we've done with the Nike swoosh. And we fed through some more tennis content. And with the AI, it has identified all of the content that contains the Nike swoosh. And you can see here where it has picked up the logo on various different items of the player's clothing, etc., shoes and everything. So it's finding it within the images and then returning them as a positive match for this logo.
It's really cool stuff, Ruth. Thanks for sharing that with us. Super powerful tools, as you all can see, for monitoring your brand out there in the wild. And now I think we have time, Ruth. When we were prepping for the session, you showed me a video capability that you've been working on that I thought was really super cool. Maybe I think we have time to share that with the audience. Can we share that with them?
Yeah, sure, great.
Awesome.
So we have this, the same technology can work within video as well as the still images to find specific content. So we've actually been experimenting with ways to measure brand exposure from paid sponsorships. So in this case here, we're looking at a Manchester City football match and specifically the advertising boards around the pitch. So the model has been trained to recognize all of the brands that have paid for their advertising to appear around the pitch. And what we've done is we've assigned a prominence score, you see just here, to the appearance of the advert. So we've taken a few parameters to calculate that score, and these are how close the advert is appearing to the action, which is actually just the distance from the ball. So how far is it away from the ball at this point, how big it appears, and how clear it is. So you will see that the clarity is affected by the advert being in sunshine or in shadow. So on the left here, where it's in bright sunshine, it's not so clear, whereas in the shade, it's obviously much easier to see. So from this info, then we can gather all of these scores together, and we've just exported that data and pulled it all together in order to get a final score for each individual brand. And then, as we can see from the results here, we have, in fact, it's Nike who have actually done very well out of this particular coverage of the match.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's also worth sort of noting that this footage is actually highlights from the match. So you could also add another parameter in there saying that if the advert's appearing obviously at the highlight points where a goal is scored, etc., we'll get greater exposure because it'll get replayed again.
Yeah, wild stuff. I mean, really the future to come, right? That type of analysis, and I think that's gonna, end up driving a lot of marketing decisions and advertising models in the future, having the ability to analyze the performance of your brand and the value of your marketing campaigns in that way. Thanks so much, Ruth, for sharing that with us today. Really cool stuff on the AI front. And really, again, as you saw, that's going to really allow you to monitor your brand out there in the wild, to make sure you have that consistency. Also, as Ruth mentioned, to find influencer content and license that in. That's becoming a very popular thing to do, as tons of people are promoting or influencing sales of your products, and you may want to actually license in some of that content. So it gives you the ability to find that as well. And that video capability, again, to look at kind of all different channels across all different things and look at the ways different products, images, visual aspects, applying those visual search capabilities to your brand assets and your marketing content is really the wave of the future in terms of understanding where your messaging is going, how consistent it is, and how valuable it is. So thank you for sharing that with us today, Ruth. Really appreciate that. Just to sum up, again, brand legal compliance is incredibly important to maintain and capture the rights to be legally compliant. Provide that transparency for the rights through your organization so that folks have an understanding of what they can and can't do with content. Making sure that your brand is consistent, so being able to identify where your logo is, where your product is, where your brand is being represented, where your spokespersons are showing up and how they're reflecting your brand, and being able to monitor that. And being able to keep that all consistent across a myriad of distribution channels and types of content are really the 4 pillars of brand management, brand asset management going forward that you're going to need to worry about in order to really stay positive, effective, and competitive in the market. So if you want to learn more or chat with us, we'll be at our booth here on the event platform for DAMFest Europe after the session. So feel free to drop by and chat with us, or you can reach out to us via email at solutions@fidel.com and schedule a one-on-one discussion if you want to learn more about these techniques and best practices, and we can help you understand what you need to do to keep your brand compliant and to amplify your brand messaging. So thanks, everybody. I think we have time for a few questions. Absolutely. If we have any questions, let me just check and see if we have any questions that have come in. We do have a couple questions here that have come in. So let me see. The first question is, how do you integrate with DAMs or other systems? So that's a plugin to the DAM. As far as Fidel's rights management system, it's a plugin to the DAM. As I mentioned, capturing rights data in DAM metadata can be really complicated unless your rights clearance issues are very simple. So if it's domestic or international, that can work in a metadata field. But when you start to have dates, channels, territories, windows, then you really need a tool that you can capture that in. And that tool needs to be able to integrate via API to your DAM system. So you need on both ends, rights management and DAM system, the ability to connect those via the API, which, as you saw during the presentation, we have that capability to connect up the rights clearance through API right into your DAM. So that's really how that's done. Do you provide expiration reports or notifications? Yeah, very important, as well as the real-time clearance, to be able to get notifications and reporting out of your rights management system, to be able to have those delivered to somebody's inbox, so that you know, obviously, if you find out something is expired, it's already a problem, right? So you need to know ahead of time that something is going to expire in the next 30, 60 days, et cetera, so that you can deal with that. So it's important to have that reporting. Rights Cloud at Fidel provides reporting for expiration and notifications around that, and subscription to those reports. So that's something you definitely want to have in your capabilities. Are you teaching the system to find a logo? Maybe you can speak to that, Ruth. Are we teaching, like when you think about AI, sometimes you think about training, and you did mention the training, but you also mentioned face matching. So maybe you could talk about the distinction there and what you did in order to kind of find that logo.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, for the logo, we did train the model to recognize the logo. So you feed a bunch of content into it, and so it learns what it's looking for. It learns what the logo looks like, and also the more you train it, and as time goes on, the more it's used, it gets better at recognizing the particular features as well. Whereas then for the face searching, that is simply a face match. So we're not having to train anything there.
It's more of a visual. I think Ruth froze up there. It's more of a visual match for that, yeah, as well. So just to reiterate there, in case you didn't hear what Ruth said, it's kind of visual matching when it comes to face matching and face searching. And for the logo, there is a training process there of training on the model to understand what that logo looks like and where it is. And the follow-up question there was, can you search for a logo in a PDF? And the answer is, yeah, everything Ruth was showing us can be applied to photos, videos, or PDFs, and can search content for all those kinds of things. So I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And I hope to see you stop by our virtual booth afterwards. We'd love to chat with you. Thanks again to Henry Stewart and Tom for having us here today. And thanks to all of you. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg and Ruth, for that great session. And thank you to everyone for joining us for today's celebration of all things DAM. Stick around at DAMFest Europe for the free breathwork session, which is taking place over in track 1. If you head back to the agenda tab, go to track 1. You should be able to go there, where you'll learn how to use breath as a powerful method of self-exploration. All you need to participate is somewhere to lie down and some headphones. There's also still time to check out the exhibition, where you can remember to drop your virtual business card to be in with a chance of winning some excellent prizes. And a reminder that recordings from today's event are now accessible in the agenda tab, so you can catch up on anything you may have missed. Finally, we hope to see you at our recently announced 2022 in-person events. Take advantage of launch offers and secure your place at a highly discounted rate. Thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.